Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
Hello and welcome. Here we are for another episode of our Inner Circle, where we get to meet some of the world's best, working with some of the world's best in hearing care, helping them bring their outside advantage to your business and helping you to be able to raise the bar. Today I have one of my dear friends, Mr. Scott McKain, who isn't just a dear friend. He's an expert in so many things. He's been supporting businesses for more time than I would care to be able to share with you at this moment in time, supporting some of the world's biggest brands, author of dozens of amazing bestsellers, including his most recent publication in the book Iconic. And I've had the chance to see Scott work his magic on big stages, in small conversations, and personally as we've jammed about each other's businesses. And I always know he's going to drop bombshells. So coming at us live today from Las Vegas, Nevada, my dear friend, Mr. Scott McKain, welcome.
Phil, as always, it's great being with you, my friend. Thank you for having me here. This is great.
So Scott, we're going to dive straight into this. And you wrote a book called Iconic. And I think it is something that people often describe themselves as, or might choose to be able to label other people as, without necessarily having a true understanding of what is meant by the word. So through your definition, what does being iconic truly mean?
It means that you're so good at what you do, you're not only distinctive within your own industry, it means you become the standard by which all are judged. In the book, I write about, I was trying to get away, Phil, and I know that you do as well. I was trying to get away from the old examples of Apple and Amazon and, Southwest Airlines, the one that everybody talks about. And I wrote about this restaurant in Indianapolis, St. Elmo's. It's not that other restaurants would like to be St. Elmo's. That would be distinctive, right? They're the best of breed of their particular business or industry. It's that they're so good that every business models themselves on the standard that they set. So most businesses are trapped at the sea of sameness. It's hard for a customer to tell the difference between the service that they provide, whether it's hearing aids or whatever it might be. The customer doesn't see any real difference between them. Then there's distinction, which means you stand out within your particular field. And then being iconic is that you're so good at what you do, you transcend your industry and you become recognized as a model that any business could follow.
I love that very crystal clear description of the fact that you're transcending any given industry, that you are so good to a point, so worthy of talking about, have so much remarkability in what it is that you do, that people are looking to be able to bring that application across into a variety of different fields. Now, we're talking to hearing care professionals today, and I was struggling like crazy to think, I've got to be able to find a hearing care business that could meet Scott's definition of iconic. And guess what? I couldn't find one.
Yeah.
Not a single one.
It's incredibly difficult. You nailed it, Phil, because that's why it's such rarefied air. But I think if they would focus first on how do we be distinctive? How do we separate ourselves from the competition in the hearing aid business? Then as they go through that process, that would be the next step for them, that they would be able to move to that iconic level. But you got to be distinctive before you can be iconic.
So some way of separating, finding distinction before being iconic, standing out from the crowd, working out what it is your differentiator is the key. See, what I'm hearing here, though, right now is that the fact that nobody has managed to be able to do this in this industry is not bad news, it's good news.
It's great news. No, you're exactly right. Exactly. Notice how I worked that in. You're exactly right. Because if no one's there yet, it means the door is open. It means that you have that opportunity right now. And the question is, will you execute the steps that are required to get there?
What we have in the hearing care space, Scott, and I've worked in this space for some time, is we have an army of people who want to do things the way they've always done things, because that's the way they were trained to do it. They want to lean on those best practices. They don't want to change things. And then what also has happened over that same period of time is we've had a number of other people get involved in the space.
Sure.
There is high margin or high perceived margin in the dispensing of hearing devices. There are lots of other organizations that say, I want to have a piece of that. Some of the big examples of that are people coming from the outside world, like the big box retailers, the Sam's Clubs, the Costco's of this world, that have shown up. And what they've really said is we do the same as these independent hearing care clinics, but at half the money. And then you've got the online retailers that have got involved in this too and says, no need to come in, we'll bring it straight towards you. And guess what? We're half the money too. So what they've managed to be able to do is differentiate themselves from the masses largely on a price or a convenience-based value proposition. The giant part of the industry in this scenario has responded with a version of it's not fair. Right, is like, this is our train set, please don't come play with it, and really try to resist this competition coming in a different way. But as I look for even sprinklings of iconicness within the hearing care space, they all come from the disruptors from the outside. And that's what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years. I ask independent hearing care clinics a simple set of questions. And I did a series of workshops last year, worked with over 800 different hearing care clinics. And the question I asked them was, can you all write down on a piece of paper or in front of you, what are the reasons as why a patient should choose you as opposed to somebody like you? I asked them to write that question, and they all came back with the exact same answer. They said, well, it's our service. Mm-hmm. Our service is the reason. It's funny, right? You write about the same thing here in Iconic, is that people claim that their service is the thing that differentiates, but everybody else is claiming the same thing is what differentiates, therefore it doesn't differentiate. What does Scott McKain say about all of that stuff?
Oh, I wrote about it in the book Create Distinction and Collapse of Distinction years ago. I did a project for a financial services company, and they said, okay, interview our A-plus top producers, the best in the world, and then interview our B-plus producers. And I thought that was very perceptive. It's easier to take somebody from B-plus to A-plus than it is from C to A, right? So how do we tweak the B-plus producers? And what was interesting was when I asked the A-plus producers what differentiated them in the marketplace, they were very specific and precise about their answer. And their answers varied from advisor to advisor. At B+, they all said, our service makes the difference. Matter of fact, 80% of those that I interviewed at the B+ level said their service makes the difference. Well, as you point out, if 80% are saying that's what makes us different, it's like, what's the study that says 80% of us think we're above average drivers? That's impossible. Right. 80% can't be above average by the definition of average. So, and I see as an outsider looking in, and I've had the privilege of speaking for one of the manufacturers in this industry. As an outsider looking in, it's exactly what you see, is that we presume what we think makes us different is what makes us different for customers. But the phenomenon, and it's happening in this industry as it happens in many industries, is simply this. If the customer or the prospective customer cannot see the difference, then why wouldn't they make a choice based on price? Because the only way they become a customer is to see some kind of difference. We do that when we're buying. I mean, if you're shopping for a car and the same model of car is available at one dealer for $500 less than it's available for another dealer, we don't see that much difference between one car dealer and the other. So we tend to go where we can save the $500. Customers are making those same kinds of decisions about us. Therefore, it's incumbent on us to provide a point of differentiation that's meaningful to the customer. And that's where I separate distinction from differentiation. If at your clinic, if you slap every customer in the face, you're different. You have differentiated yourself in the marketplace. But it doesn't, exactly. But it doesn't mean they're going to buy an aid from you. It doesn't mean they're going to buy from you. It just means that you made yourself different. I see a lot of businesses that think, if we just do something that's different, we'll make our logo yellow instead of red. And that doesn't mean anything to customers.
Mm-hmm. Now, we see a lot of it here as well, where people jump to we're going to create a mobile solution just to be different, but they haven't thought about the fact as to whether that's truly going to add value to a customer base or not. Or we're going to add, accessories as mail out options towards people so that we can be different, but it isn't truly ticking a convenience box with a customer base, etc. They're not listening to what the customers are saying. Is an example of this disruption piece coming into an industry that always gets talked about, but rarely gets taken in the right direction is the Uber to the minicab industry, right? Is minicab industry said it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. Uber showed up and gave consumers something that was easier for them to work with, was different, has now become iconic in a way that transcends industries. People talk about the Uber of everything nowadays.
Yeah,
now, what I find interesting, though, is there's a story that you've been sharing both recently and a fair amount of time in the past that I think is as relevant today as it's ever been the first time it came out of your mouth. And I think people need to hear it. And it's about an experience that you had with a minicab once. And I'd love it if you could share it with us.
I was giving a speech in Jacksonville, Florida, and the flight was late, and I'm tired. I'm dragging my old beat up body and my old beat up suitcase through the airport to get a cab to take me to the hotel where I was speaking the next morning. And I walk out of the airport. The line for cabs is really long, and I'm tired. And I take my place at the back of the queue, and I'm waiting, and I'm listening to what other cab drivers are saying as they were picking up their passengers. And it's the thing you would imagine, Phil. Where you going, cash or credit, how many in your party. I get my way finally to the front of the line. The next cab's going to be mine. I'm standing there half asleep, thinking about how I got to meet the client for breakfast in the morning, give a keynote the next, at 8 a.m. And guy pulls up, and my cab driver does something completely different. He jumps out of his cab, points at me in the front of the line, and shouts, "Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?" And I start looking around like, man, well, yeah, I guess so. He says, "Get in." Okay, so now I'm afraid, what nut is picking me up, right? So he jogs over, he gets my bag, he jogs back, he puts my suitcase in his trunk, jumps into his driver's seat, spins around to me in the back, and he sticks out his hand. And he says, "Mr. McKain?" And I went, "Yeah, but how'd you know my name?" He said, "Saw it on your luggage, figured I might as well use it." He said, "I'm Taxi Terry." And I thought, why did I get stuck with a motivational cab driver?
Right.
So I shake the guy's hand, we take off. He said, "So where are you heading tonight, Mr. McKain?" I said, "Well, the Marriott downtown." "Fantastic, sir. How long will we be in Jacksonville?" "Well, just a couple days." He said, "Great. Let's check out the weather." Now, it's midnight. I'm meeting a client for breakfast at 6:45. I don't care if there is weather at this point, right? just get me to the hotel. He touches his dash, it lights up. He's got an iPhone and an elaborate bracket, magnifying glass over the screen. He is live real time on weather.com for Jacksonville. I now have the instant forecast for my stay. I know I could have looked at it on my own phone, but it's kind of cool. He thought to provide something unexpected for the customer. He said, "Man, I hope you're a golfer, Mr. McKain. You're going to have 2 awesome days in Jacksonville. Why are you here?" I said, "Well, I'm giving a speech in the morning on customer service." The guy freaks out. "Customer service? I am so into that." He said, "Do you mind if I record our conversation?" And he touches a button on his visor. And I'm thinking, who are you really? I'm in Cash Cab or Taxi Cab Confessions or some show. I asked him, I said, why are you so prepared to record the conversations in your cab? He says, "Well, you see, Mr. McKain, if I'm taking Dr. Smith to the airport, he's a local customer. And during the ride, he mentions that his daughter, Jill, is just enrolled at Vanderbilt University." He said, "Well, as soon as he gets out of the cab, I hit my button. I record that information. Every night when I get home, then I take these recordings and I enter the information into my database." A cab driver with CRM, right? He says, then the next time that the doctor makes a reservation, that information will pop up to remind me as he gets in the cab in conversation. I will say, "Gosh, I've been wondering, doctor, it's so good to see you. How's Jill doing at Vanderbilt?" And he said, at that point, "Do you think he's going to let anybody else take him to the airport?" right? I mean, it's incredible personalization. He told me some of the other amazing things he's done. So now he gets me to the hotel, and we've all been there. The cab driver gives you a receipt. What do? You hang on to the receipt. On the other side of the receipt's always their card or their contact number, hoping you will call them or their company to take you back wherever you came from. And Taxi Terry does something different again. He jumps out of the cab, he runs to the back, gets my luggage out. He holds my bag as if it were kin. He walks my bag in his arms up to the bellman, hands the bellman my bag, and says, "Presenting Mr. McKain." I'd never been presented before, right? And now he looks at me, raises his hand, nothing in his hand. He says, "Mr. McKain, I know that you travel a lot, as we learned in our conversation." And he said, "You're obviously in a lot of cabs or ride services." He said, "I hope to franchise this someday. Everything from, are you ready for the best cab ride of your life, to the iPhone on the dash, to everything." And he said, "So if you ever run into a cab driver that could use some help with customer service," I think that'd be all of them.
All of them, yeah. All of them, yeah.
He said, "You tell him about Taxi Terry." He didn't give me a receipt. He said, "By the way, to reserve your return trip and to print out your receipt, go to my website, taxiterry.com. So here's a cab driver. He's got customer service. He's got an official website. So I get up the next morning, give him a little speech, and I speaking to IBM, and I didn't know, right? And I said, that's the biggest thing that's happened to me for a while. So I said, "Hey, last night at the airport, this guy said, 'Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?' And the audience in unison went, 'Taxi Terry.'" I had no idea. He's the official cab driver for IBM. He sold them a service agreement. So here's the point, Phil, that you've heard me make before, and I'd love to continue to reinforce, is that this works on several levels in this industry. First of all, if I can get that kind of experience from a taxi cab, why wouldn't I expect it when I need a hearing aid? Secondly, Taxi Terry got the business, and he is beating Uber and other cab companies because he decided to play a different game. He went on offense. And what he did was, as long as I am selling a solution, now price is not as important. No one should ever say price isn't important to a customer. It's always important. But where is it on the scale of making that choice? And so what he did was go to IBM, and he said, "I'm going to be your vice president of transportation." They said, "We don't have one of those." He said, "Well, you do now. If you need individual rides, I have taxi cabs for that. If you need elite transportation for your clients or executives, I own a limousine for that. If you need group transportation, I have vans for that." So we bought a couple of vans. He bought a limo. It's just absolutely incredible what he has done. And what he did was, it's a choice that you're talking about with these folks, Phil. I mean, it's the same choice. Am I going to play the price game by fighting Uber? Am I going to play the price game in this industry by fighting Costco, Sam's Club, Amazon? Or am I going to take a different approach? Am I going to be a solutions provider? Am I going to get closer to my customers than they can? And I think the opportunity is ripe in this industry. I mean,
it's right there for the taking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my dad wore a hearing aid.
Answer me this, Scott. How much did you pay for the taxi ride with Taxi Terry?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
I don't recall. But I will tell you this. I rode with him about 20 more times after that as I completed the project with IBM. I didn't even consider another alternative. I know that many people have ridden with Taxi Terry based on my referral and recommendation. I got him a convention business. The convention was meeting in Jacksonville. They arranged all the rides through Taxi Terry so they could experience that kind of service and then turn to their people and say, "See, this is what we need to be doing in our business. Look what, our friend Laura Otting has ridden with him simply because of hearing the story." I mean, that's what a thrilled customer can do for you. is
It
bring
creates virality, right? From a word of mouth point of view. And I love that story. I love the nostalgia in the story. I love the realness in the story for how it's relevant today as it was the day that you first experienced it. And I know that everybody listening in right now is thinking, yeah, but that's in the taxi cab industry. Yeah, but that won't work for me. Or like we've got all of these barriers or points of friction for us wanting to be able to make those kind of changes. What I'd like you to think about as you're listening to Scott share that story is yeah, but how could you? How could you start to be able to implement some of these things, some of the factors, some of the principles that sit behind that story into your practice, starting to be able to differentiate into a way that means that you might reach a level of distinction that means iconic becomes closer to being in grasp. And Scott, what I want to do is I want to put you to work. And you don't normally get the chance to do this in speech.
Well,
yes, you can.
May I? I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said something I'd love to piggyback on, and that is the philosophy that, well, that's in another industry. And I think that's exactly where they should be looking right now.
Right.
The story that I've told for a while is that the Taylor family is starting a rental car business in St. Louis years ago. Now, if you think about it, there's a lot in common that might not first be apparent within the hearing aid business. For example, the Ford I get from Avis is identical to the Ford I get from Hertz. The Phonak device I would get from one supplier, one dealer, one place is exactly the same as one I would get elsewhere. Okay, so how do you differentiate? So the Taylor family, as they're opening their one little rental car store, thinking about how do we compete with the big players, they made a list of every point of contact that a customer might have with a rental car agency. And it's in the book, Create Distinction. There were 13 of them. They said, let's just pick one. Let's pick one point and do it completely differently. And as some folks probably are already ahead of me, the Taylor family named that little rental car store Enterprise Rental Car. And the one thing they did differently is they pick you up. They said, what if we brought the car to the customer rather than making the customer come to us and get the car? So it was that one thing. You don't have to do everything differently. Do one thing. Okay, so there's a guy who leaves his job and has an idea for a business. He puts a door on concrete blocks for his desk in his garage. That's how he starts. He says, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to get into book business, which I dearly love, I could either create a bookstore and compete with Barnes & Noble and Borders then and others, or, what if I did for books what Enterprise did? Rather than confine my thinking to the book business and try to be another Barnes & Noble, what if I become the Enterprise rental car of books? What if we took the books to them rather than making them come to the store and get the books? And Jeff Bezos said, that's how we can start Amazon, not by looking at other bookstores, but by looking at what other successful, disruptive, innovative businesses were doing. And fast forward, now there's a dentist in Austin, Texas that said, well, what if I do this for the dental business? So he created a dental office on wheels. And you make your appointment with the dentist's office and they pull up in front of your house. And you walk out of your house into the trailer and you get your dental work done basically in your driveway. And now the guy's having to build more trailers because he's filling up his appointments so much. So he didn't look at other dentists. Right? How do I build a better practice? Well, I'll look at other dentists. Instead, he said, what if I became the Amazon of dentists? And Amazon said, what if we become the Enterprise rental car of books? And so what if you became that? And I'm not talking about delivery. I'm not talking about, although that might be part of it. I mean, what could you learn from, if Steve Jobs came back magically and decided instead of returning to Apple, he was going to run your business, what would he do? If
I think we can take it even more simple than this, right? Because if Steve Jobs came back into the hearing care space and said, what would he do? He'd find a way of putting it into everybody's device and try and do it for $1, but serve 1 billion people, right? is those kind of ideas would be done. And sometimes that level of extreme thinking is what shuts us down on a local small business level that says, I'm just going to try and ride this out until somebody does that big thing that then eats my dinner.
Yeah, but Steve Jobs also created the Apple Store, which has more sales per square foot than any other, more than Tiffany. So in terms of how you create that experience, he didn't look at other retailers to create the Apple retail experience. He didn't
Without question. And I'm with you. We got to be from outside.
Yeah,
Scott, let's go to work for hearing care. I want my brain and your brain in this conversation to say, okay, let's take this, let's move it forward, right? The industry has been disrupted by circumstance as well, right? The healthcare difficulties of 2020 have resulted in things like now curbside service becoming a thing. The technology's moved to a point where remote support and some more supporting patients through portals like this and programming from a distance are all factors that now could be included. That could be a plus point. It could be something that you see in fear of, like, we're not necessary anymore. Somebody could go direct. There are so many things. There are 5 things I read in Iconic that were almost these steps, these guiding lights, these principles, this idea of playing offense, getting the promise and performance right, stopping selling, going negative, and the reciprocal respect piece, those 5 things. And I thought we could jam out a little and say, well, how might we be able to come up with some ideas for people about how they could effectively, say, play offense right now with the viewpoint to say, how do I become distinctive and reach for iconic? So where could we start with that, Scott? How could we do a better job of playing offense?
Well, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here, is the play offense factor. Playing defense means... Now, in no way am I, nor I know would you, suggest that you shouldn't be aware of your competition. Sports analogies are overused, but I'll use one anyway. The NFL season starts tonight here in the United States. I'm certain that both the 2 teams playing tonight know who the opponent is. I'm certain that they've done a little bit of investigating about what the opponent is doing.
Right.
However, the way that you win the game, part of how I started researching this is if you're a sports fan, one of the things you've heard forever is defense wins championships. The only problem with that statement is it ain't true. I mean, other than that, it's a great statement. If you look at the Super Bowl champions, more offensive, the offensively superior team has won more Super Bowls. They won more playoff games. Defense does not win the championship. Offense does. Okay, so how do you go on offense? It means, first of all, you're aware of the competition, but you don't imitate them. You don't imitate what the competition is doing. You create your own pathway. So part of creating your own pathway is exactly the exercise that you and I just went through. What are some of the disruptive things that are happening in other industries? So if we brought that to our industry, how could we do that? In sports, some of the football coaches saw what was happening in basketball when the pace picked up and they got more offensively minded. So what did they do? They stopped the running game. They started the passing game. They became more, fluid in the approach. There's a business lesson in that. Let's take a look at what's happening in other fields. How could we bring that here? What's the game that you want to play? And one of my clients said, I quoted him in the book, one of my clients had this great aha, and he said, I realized that every moment that I spent playing defense against my competition was also a moment that I wasted innovating to make them irrelevant.
Yep.
And I think that's our challenge.
I'm thinking about reaching into other industries here. I know that you have huge experience, say, in the hospitality industry. The parallels between the hospitality industry and the hearing care industry are actually huge, because in the hearing care industry, all of the promise is made up front. You often part with all of the money up front, and then the service comes afterwards. Yeah. Difference is, in the hospitality industry, that's often confined to a night or a week or a fortnight, whatever it might be in terms of experience. And in the hearing care scenario, all of the promise is delivered over a 3-year, a 5-year, a 7-year period of time by the provider. Sounds to me like there's a big chance to play offense in touch points that happen post-sale.
Yes, absolutely. And that leads into the point that you mentioned earlier about promise performance. Because what happens is the only way that customers really judge us is their evaluation of our performance based upon their perception of the promise. Now,
Wrote that down. Your brand is how customers evaluate the performance you have delivered based on the promise they perceive you have made.
Yes, exactly.
I wrote that down from your book. I thought that was pretty profound.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, if you think about take off your hearing aid cap, and put on your customer cap for a second. How do we evaluate any purchase decision that we have made? Well, what did we believe that the product was promising to deliver or the service was promising to deliver? And then we evaluate, did we receive what we expected, what we felt we had been promised? And so one of the challenges that many businesses get into of all sizes is the group that makes the promise isn't the group responsible for the performance. And in that gap is where customer dissatisfaction often arises.
I thought stumbled across something.
Yeah. What's that? I'm sorry?
We've just stumbled across a wonderful discovery. Everybody else is making a promise based on the product.
Mm-hmm. Right. Instead of the solution, or instead of
the service, what is going to be delivered by the individual, the human attributes, the steps that exist along that way, the differentiators in the 39-point process that is created that results in long-term better hearing. It's not a switch that you click over that says you were broken, now you're fixed. It's understanding that what's for sale is service where the hearing device is a tool, not a hearing device that's for sale with services attached to it. And the work in playing offense is to lean into that service proposition, which means that you've got to get your service promise right? It's that promise that is actually missing, because what we're currently saying is the device is going to be the hero. So providing the device
is the hero. I mean, think about mobile phones. Think about cell phones for a minute. Are you more loyal to your iPhone, for example, or are you more loyal to AT&T? Well, at the end of the day, I don't care whether it's Verizon or AT&T, but for God's sake, I'm not giving up my iPhone.
Right.
Well, and why is that? It is because those companies, Verizon the possible exception, but those companies have focused more on making it easier for you to get the device than creating loyalty for their service. I don't sense a differentiation between those companies. And I see that happening in this industry as well, is that the manufacturers are naturally trying to build consumer loyalty towards their line of devices. Right. And in many cases, what happens with independent retailers is they parrot what those manufacturers have said into the marketplace, which dilutes any distinction that they might bring to prospective customers.
The exact issue that this industry has is new product gets launched. What we're going to do is that we are going to just regurgitate all of the features and benefits that have been provided by manufacturer onto the consumer base, making the product the hero of the story, not educating a patient on what they should be looking at when it comes to being able to make a buying decision.
Oh, and to your point, Phil, to your point too, Phil, and also it is to the manufacturer's benefit to build in a degree of fear that if you don't promote our latest product and your competition does, then if you don't, in other words, everything for the manufacturer should be to try to drive an independent retailer into sameness. That look, if you don't promote, I mean, think about this. If T-Mobile didn't promote iPhone 12 whenever it comes out, and AT&T and Verizon do, then what's the damage? I mean, it's to Apple's advantage to say, if you don't promote my new product, our customers are going to, because they're loyal to the device, not to you. So you better be promoting it. So it's to the manufacturer's advantage to make every retailer the same. Because if the loyalty is to the device and not to where you bought it, then it is also harder for where you bought it to create customer loyalty.
I hope you caught that, everybody listening in. It's the manufacturer's advantage to make the consumer loyal to the device, loyal to the brand, that way around, as opposed to have loyalty towards your brand. If what we do is we play offense by educating consumers more that the promise they're getting from you is not access to great products. That's a given. That's like at the bottom of the promise. That's the yes and. That's the well, of course part that goes with it, in the same way that every restaurant says that you shouldn't leave hungry, right? Like that's what is existing here. The promise is taking the time to be able to define it so you get the promise and performance right. So it's not a case of under promise and over deliver. What is it by alternative, Scott? We're not looking to under-promise, over-deliver. What are we looking to do instead?
It's congruency between promise and performance. There's some really fascinating research out of the University of San Diego that says that in long-term relationships, which of course is what every one of us here wants to have, right? In long-term relationships, those retailers that consistently under-promise and over-deliver are eventually viewed as manipulative. It is not to our advantage to consistently under-promise and over-deliver. It is to our advantage to have total congruency between what we promise and what we deliver. Because the highest thing that customers are looking for is to be able to recommend you. And how do they recommend you? It's that they say they did what they said they would do when they said they would do it.
Here's an issue that exists in this industry. I'd really love to get your take on it. Is historically, and this has largely been manufacturer-led across the board, is people have bundled into their sale price a lifetime of aftercare, a lifetime of service that comes with it. Yet the biggest expense to every hearing care dispenser is the service that they provide over that sustained period of time. And when they deliver a lifetime of service, the only way they get a new transaction is as if somebody buys something new. But why do I buy something new when I've got a lifetime of service? So it creates this giant paradox. I have my opinions on whether you should or shouldn't give a lifetime service attached to any purchase. But before I give mine, what's your take on this, Scott?
Well, I mean, I think it provides a selling advantage when you don't do that, right? I mean, why would I want to commit myself to a lifetime of inferior service as a customer, right? I mean,
a lifetime of inferior service,
right? I mean, seriously, I mean, that's basically what they're promising. And I think we have to have an honest conversation. Look, at the end of the day, you know that the price of service is built into this. And so the only way that we can provide extraordinary service is to be able to have conversations with you about that service. Why would you expect a lifetime of service? Why wouldn't you expect extraordinary service on this device? Mm-hmm. And I think,
and that means defining what extraordinary service is, though, right? Is taking the time to itemize and piece by piece and say, what is that? What are the boundaries?
Yes, exactly. Because the other thing is, we've got to give our customers a little bit of credit in today's world for being perceptive and being smart. I mean, if somebody says to me, you know, this thing has a lifetime guarantee, there's a part of me that thinks, oh, wow, they believe in their product. But there's another part of me that thinks, really? Then, really? I mean, how long do they think I'm going to live? You know, it's like the financial advisor that says you have enough money to last for the rest of your life as long as you die next Thursday. You know? Yeah. It's like I have an innate distrust at the onset. When someone says this comes with lifetime service, you know, it's like the old thing that's in. Have you ever seen there's a lot of like dry cleaners would have it? Fast service, friendly service, cheapest price, pick one.
Yeah.
I love that. It's true.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
It's so similar to what yours are. I think offering lifetime service is both lazy selling at the front end.
Yes.
It's trying to give the farm away at the front end because you don't truly believe in what you're asking somebody. And that's often where it's fueled. It's fueled from a lack of belief in your own value prop that says, well, actually, I'm going to just keep throwing stuff at this. We give you batteries for life. We'll give you lifetime service. Come back as often as you need it. And it stinks of that you were charging too much. Yeah. That's what it smells of as a consumer when somebody's putting that out. It says that you believe there's so much money in this, I can take care of you forever.
That's a great
I don't mind that if it was a diamond ring. Like if it was a diamond ring and they said, you come back in here anytime you like, you got a lifetime guarantee on this, lifetime warranty, we'll polish it every time you come in. I get that. Why? Because if I take my wife back into Boodles in London, there's a strong possibility that she's going to find something else she likes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's all part of the customer experience that comes with it.
And the sales process.
It takes 30 seconds to clean the ring, but they make it take 30 minutes.
Right.
They give us time to browse, give us a glass of champagne, and help us see some of the latest and greatest. And that cleaning cost me tens of thousands of dollars. So like that stuff happens in that environment. But here in hearing care, I want a well-defined service proposition, because a well-defined service proposition is what could make me iconic, is how you do what you do.
You're exactly
That's where we're running at.
Well, think of a surgeon. I mean, would a surgeon ever give you a lifetime guarantee? I mean, would a doctor ever say, I've treated you once for the flu and come back as much as you want for the rest of your life? No doctor would ever say that.
But it's like having a lifetime service on spray tans, though. It's more like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like because there are these never-ending touch points and the money comes into it from there. So I'm asking people to do two things then, is if I'm taking your philosophy of what it takes to be iconic, is play offense, but do it through your service differentiators, not your product differentiators on how you do things. And everybody listening in does things differently. Do the work to be able to double down on some of those. I liked what you said, though, about the enterprise example, where it was looking at that one point that says, we bring the car to you. You've all got a point in the patient experience that you could say, I could do that demonstrably different. I could make that remarkable. I could play offense on that. And I could really define that value proposition that goes with it.
No, it's exactly.
Even if you could play with something here where a giant part of your promise was to look after the families of all of the patients that you help and create some way that says, as people bring more of their nearest and dearest to you, they compound discounts and they compound service benefits that way round. That would be a tiny way that you could say, hey, we would be very distinctive in the way we're doing things.
Let me ask you a question, Phil. That's just popped in my head. When someone, because my dad had a hearing aid, and one of the biggest problems, as I recall, when Dad made the choice of where he was going to go, was first off making the choice that it was hard for him to admit that he needed one. Mm-hmm. But then there was also no education for the family about how Dad was going to change because now he could hear. How the television needed to be. When you were saying that, it just kind of struck me. It would be kind of cool for a retailer, for example, to have a YouTube video for the family of what was going to change because Dad or Mom or whomever now had a device that was going to change their life. Because let's face it, it not only changes the life of the person with the device, it changes the lives of everyone around them. It might be one way that, and therefore, if the husband gets the hearing device, but the wife needs one, but doesn't want to admit it, just like my dad didn't want to admit it, it might get them to think, gosh, my life could change too. I mean, there might be ways to do that. Just an idea off the top of my head.
I like the idea. We've done things with that with clients in the past where we've done case studies of spouses and family members and the impact that it's had in that area. But what I'm hearing from you, just bring that back up again, is an evolution of that could be, echoes of reasons why somebody should act today that are coming from wife of, husband of, friend of, son of, daughter of, aunt of, etc., that those voices are actually talking into the pre-decision making process. But if what we're looking to be able to do is to build our promise around service, we need it to not be the product again.
Example, Phil, I'm about to share with you, but it popped in my head, so to speak. Well, anyway, so I got this call from a group of medical clinics that was having some difficulty, and they wanted me to help them and consult with them. And this is pre-Viagra, so many years ago, but it was a chain of male impotency clinics. And the question they, honest to God, asked me is, why aren't we getting more referrals? We know we do a great job. And I said,
I know the answer to this question, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what guy is going to say to another guy, hey, Phil, by the way, I said,
let me introduce you to my guy, right?
Yeah, I got a guy, I said, you need to market to the spouses. You need to market to the wife. So that the wife, because one wife will say to another, oh, I don't think my husband, and I don't mean to be, sexist or gender specific, but that was the chain of clinics I was working with at the time. And it strikes me that a lot of, I was just doing coaching with somebody in the heating, air conditioning, HVAC business.
Yep.
And he needed more qualified employees. And he said, I don't get it. I'm running ads through my local cable service on ESPN saying, hey, you want a better job? Come apply. And I said, that you're running it the wrong place. You need to run it on Lifetime and Oprah, Oxygen. And why is that? Because the spouse wants the husband, and that's a predominantly male industry, the spouse wants the husband to have a better job or to get home on time or to not work on weekends or... So it's let them right?
Such a good point, because it's who's experienced the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
The person experiencing the problem isn't necessarily the decision maker or the patient in this scenario, the person experiencing the problem. So we have to revisit web copy on what everybody is laying down and saying, are we identifying all of the problems that could be triggers towards buying on this? And Ollie, note to you on this, and I'm hearing this, I want some comments back in from those of you here that are in attendance. How about we take this year's Here for the Holidays campaign that we run November, December, where what we're looking to be able to do is to invite people to recommend friends, family, and we do competition around giving somebody their hearing back, but direct so much more of the language towards the people that are being affected by the hearing difficulties in their nearest and dearest, and change up the communication that way around, making sure we remember to say that we've got, a longevity of care that comes around that. If you think that would be a good idea, just comment on the chat where you think that we've stumbled across something there that could be useful.
Hey, Phil, can I share something with you here? Let me pull up the top of the slide won't be appropriately done here, but let me share this with you. I was doing a program for a group of dentists. Okay, so I went on. You mentioned websites, so I went on all these dental websites, and on how many of them do you think I saw that? That
Right.
would be all of them, right? Except for one that had this picture. And the story of that young woman who went to the dentist and said, my husband has been serving in Afghanistan for the last year. I haven't seen him for a year. And when he gets off the plane, I want to give him a smile he'll never forget. Now, what I think we tend to do so often is tout look, everybody's going to have great teeth pictures. But who has the best story? And the way that you're communicating that narrative is really important. So communicating,
We've just been doing this, Scott.
It's exactly what you said earlier. I mean, it's communicating that narrative about who is benefiting from the resolution of the issue and the problem.
And we've been trying to change so much more of the language through the clients that we work with in our inner circle, that everything they communicate is about making the patient the hero of the story, not the product or the provider. And we've just been putting a campaign together for one of our groups of inner circle members in Alaska. So Dr. Emily has collected hundreds of photographs of the things that their patient now does as a result of having better hearing. So this is, images of them fishing again, images of them hunting, enjoying hikes, enjoying walks, etc. And then there's a story that goes with every single one of those images. And that's what the homepage of the site is now showcasing. And we can do that from a marketing point of view, but you've got to collect the assets, you've got to collect the stories. And when you collect the stories, all of the language changes. Because you're not about selling hearing aids, you're not about helping people overcome their hearing loss, you're about helping people live their life again. The ultimate goal that I would see for this industry, and Scott, tell me if you'd agree with me, is that we change the perception of hearing devices that isn't you need hearing aids because you're getting old, is that it's time to get hearing aids because you've lived a great life and it's time to keep living it.
Yes.
It's that, right? Is you might notice that I'm wearing spectacles today. These are now newly a permanent fixture or a semi-permanent fixture in my life as of about a week, 10 days ago. And I've learned to like it, right? I know your specs are a key part of your life, right? You work with somebody that clearly makes them part of your brand. They're part of your story. They've become part of your existence. Yet hearing devices, everybody wants invisible. In web search, one of the most highly competitive search terms is invisible hearing aids. Yeah. So people don't want to buy these things. They don't want to pay for them. They don't want to tell anybody they own them. And if they do own them, they want nobody to see them. It's like a tough gig.
You want an invisible device, but you don't want invisible service. You don't want an invisible experience. Even if you think about the device, Phil, you could pull out your iPhone, I could pull out my iPhone, and the devices are identical. But what makes it different are the pictures that you have of your twins, the pictures I have of my wife, all of those kinds of things are what makes it personal. Loyalty is always based on emotion. And so what we have to do is understand that typically in your business, again, and you know more about it than I, but as an outsider looking in, the manufacturers are talking about the features of the device. There's no loyalty to a feature. The loyalty is to the emotional connectivity. And so the stronger that the retailer makes that emotional connection with the customer, the loyalty will the loyalty will flow to wherever the connection is. So when the connection is with you, I told this story years ago. I haven't told it for years, but Nordstrom opened in Indianapolis, where I was living at the time. And, I'd heard so much about the great customer experience at Nordstrom, and I wanted to see how they were measuring up. So I go in, and I'm looking around in men's clothes, and this woman came up to me and started a conversation, introduced herself. Her name was Lori. What do you do? Thought that was a funny question, but I told her I'm a speaker. I'm on the road all the time. And she said, wow. She said, so where do you live? And I told her where. She said, oh, I live near there. My husband and I are near there. And she said, must be hard for you to shop for clothes. I said, well, yeah, I've traveled a bunch. She said, well, look, let me get your measurements and everything and show me what you really love. And if I see something I know that you got to have, I'll just drop it off at your house. My brain explodes, right? I mean,
right.
And being kind of a cynical customer and being like what you and I do, I said, well, yeah, but you drop something off, and what if I don't like it? She said, well, just give me a call and I'll pick it up and take it back. We won't charge it until you tell me that you love it. Well, what if I need it altered? Well, just let me know. If you love it, I'll pick it up. Well, I've got your measurements. I'll get it altered. You won't have to do anything. Now, that's a heck of a promise. But you know what? She delivered. And so guess where I bought every stitch of clothing that I purchased for the next 8 years until I moved? Not from Nordstrom, from Lori. Because when Saks Fifth Avenue came and Lori changed over to Saks, so did I. My loyalty was not to Nordstrom. My loyalty was not to, Canali suits. My loyalty was to this person that cared so much about, I believe she cared more about me than my suits. Therefore, that's where I bought my suits.
And think about this whole promise piece too, right? Is people are concerned about what the state mandates as a trial period on hearing devices, and that, we'll charge them, that we've got them the opportunity to then be able to claw that money back at a later date. Like, you all have terms of credit with your manufacturers, and very few of you take the time to actually be able to translate those benefits into a reduced level of risk towards your patients. And how many of your patients right now, as we work through some of the upgrade campaign pieces that we're doing to introduce new technology, could you take that exact scenario that Scott's just talked about there with Laurie and say, hey, I got a great new product that's just come out. I think it's going to be perfect for you. I've programmed them to the results of your latest audiogram. I'm going to drop them off for you. I want you to wear them for a week or two. If you love them, you can keep them. I'll do you a great price. And if they're not for you, I'll put you back in your old ones. Like, you can sit there and worry about the risk, just like she could have worried. Like, what if Scott's going to steal my clothes and then never pay them, etc.? Your credit card details are on file. She could have dealt with that if there was an absolute tragedy that you were to run off with the clothes. But the business was won on trust. And sometimes if you are looking to be able to get the trust of your patients, the trust of your customers, then you have to put the trust in them to be able to get that reciprocal trust in the other direction. Scott, tell me what you mean by go negative. Like, you put it out there at the front of the book, you talk about it through the book. I think it's so easy to misconstrue what's meant by going negative, and why that's such an important quality as we strive to become iconic in what we do.
Thank you. It was one of the shocking things from the research, is that I think we all want to be, we want to have a positive attitude. We hear that so much. It's important to have a positive attitude. Yet one of the things that I discovered in the research was that iconic performers were not afraid of the negative. In fact, they went negative. And here's what I mean by that. Anytime there is a point of dissatisfaction that our patients or our customers might have with us, there's a reason why that happened. Yet typically what most retailers do, what most businesses do, is they try to placate that customer and make them happy, resolve the dissatisfaction, right? As we should, no argument there. But what they don't often do is to go negative. What did we do wrong? What is wrong here? What's wrong with our process? What's wrong with our procedures? What's wrong with our onboarding of employees? What's wrong with, there's something that created that problem. And so many businesses are putting Band-Aids when they need major surgery. They don't go deeply enough to fix the process. They placate the customer, but they don't fix the problem. And we've got to be willing to go negative. We got to be willing to drill deeply enough into problems. And here's the other aspect. Those of us that are managers, leaders, owners have got to get out of the shoot the messenger syndrome. There are too many businesses that if an employee brings them a problem, they think the employee is negative, as opposed to they're trying to alert us about negative situations. We ought to be rewarding employees that make us aware of negative situations, negative processes, negative results in our business, because that's where fixing that process is what it's the vaccine against more dissatisfied customers. We've got to be willing to drill into what's wrong, what's the problem. I couldn't think of any better term, and I even apologize in the book for saying it, but one of the best questions that we can possibly ask a customer, or even more importantly, somebody that chose to go someplace else, one of the most important things we could ask him is, what pissed you off? Now, there's got to be a better phrase. I'm just not good enough to come up with it. What irritated you? Where was the friction in our relationship? But all of that just seemed too, I don't know, airy for me. What did we do anything?
Here's what gets you there. 2 questions. What 3 things do you like best about working with us? And if there was one thing you could change, what would the one thing be?
What it would be?
I'll find the answer to the what pissed you off question if I ask those two by stacking it with the other question first.
And I think it's also really important and it's hard to do. It's hard to do, but to ask people who didn't buy from you. See, first of all, the problem with asking people that didn't buy from you, as you well know, is they presume you're setting them up for a sales call.
Right.
When the most important thing that you can get from them is not a transaction, but the information.
But here's the thing, Scott. In this industry, I think we know, and we just choose to ignore it and wish it would go away. I think we know why people don't buy. Like, we have a perception in the industry where the consumer believes that hearing aids are expensive. Why do they believe that hearing aids are expensive? It's because we failed to define the service that goes with it. And we've made it like sprinkles on top of a cupcake when really it's the cupcake, right? So that misconception is a giant negative that's given people the ability to exploit the private pay side of the business by making it all about price in the other direction. Yeah. What else do we know that is true from a negative point of view? Let's take the car industry. Scott and I both do a chunk of work within the car industry. In the car industry, one thing that we've learned over a period of time is people used to think it was all about the payment. It was all about the payment. It was all about the payment. The result of which is that people got the payment they wanted and then got stuck in a car that they didn't want to be stuck in for an extended length of time. Therefore, they ended up hating the brand because 49 months of owning the same car and it being too much money to be able to get out of it was a reason to fall out of love with the brand. What we're now seeing, Scott, is demonstrably different, right? If we talk about what Porsche are doing, what Jaguar Land Rover are doing, etc., to allow people to have what they want, which is an ever-changing access to the ability to be able to step into the vehicle of their choice when they need it, we're seeing some great innovation that is becoming iconic. And I think this might lead into part of the future. So tell some more about what Porsche are doing, because I know that you've been the benefactor of this.
Let me piggyback on something else, too. And I noticed it was just posted here. Think of Sewell dealerships. I don't drive any car. I drive a Sewell. A buddy of mine lives in Dallas and says exactly the same thing. Porsche basically has made it a subscription, not a purchase, that for one payment per month, you can drive any one of these Porsches. By the way, insurance and licensing included. It's just an all-in payment. And let's say this week you need the Cayenne SUV because you got a bunch of folks coming over, or you need to move stuff around. You can drive that for a week. Oh, next week I want a Panamera because I want to drive a luxury car. Oh, the week after that I want to take a Boxster in the mountains, right? You can do that for this specific payment per month. That's really cool. I just bought a new car, Phil. I haven't told you this yet. And the payment was a little more than what we had budgeted, right? But to get the car I want, the payment was a little more. And I said, well, what if we tacked on another, what if I added a year to the financing? And the salesperson said, then you need to go to the other dealership in town. And I was like, and he said, I just don't think I can build a great relationship if you're in a car that you're constantly feeling like I'm upside down. And I thought, I gotta do business with this guy. That's high integrity. That's it speaks exactly to what on the front end, he prevented me from being dissatisfied on the back end.
Yeah.
Right. And the point here about Sewell, which is a chain of dealerships in Texas, I don't know if there's any place else other than Texas, but they are known for their extraordinary service. So Randy, my friend, that has bought only Sewell cars for the last several years, Randy gets a call, and the dealer said, hey, Randy, he said, first of all, happy anniversary. And he said, it's not my wedding. He said, no, it's the anniversary of when you got your car from us. Hey, I want to know, do you love the color of your car? Yeah, I love my Lexus. He said, well, what if I brought you a brand new one and brought it to your house? I'll just pick up the old one and your payment stays the same. And Randy's like, what? You're going to bring me a new one, pick up the old one. You're just going to exchange it in the driveway and my payment stays the same. Yeah, he said, I know you got a lease and you run it through your business. Your lease payment won't change though. And is your mileage is where? Because we service the car. We know what your mileage is. So would you want me to do that? And Randy says, how does today sound? Well, what did they do? They made it easy to stay their customer. And the whole thing was based on the service and that's how you get customers for life. See, it's the way that Sewell got him to be a customer for life was not promising lifetime service.
Right. And I think there's loads in this. One of the biggest questions that people ask, and the people in the chat will confirm this, is how long will these last? You know, they're looking at this saying that this is something I'm going to buy once and I'm hoping it's going to stick with me till I don't have air in my lungs anymore and I'm stuck in a box. Yet we know that the objective is to be able to provide people the best experience at every given point through the remainder of their life, which often means that they should, if we put their experience at the top of the pile, change their devices every 12, 18, 24 months. Yet the industry on average changes them 7 to 9 years.
Oh, wow.
So there is a giant negative window there that says, can I reinvent my experience in a way that says, well, hold on, can we give the customer what they're really after? Which is better hearing over a sustained period of time with access to best technology when they need it, so they feel like they're young, they feel like they're agile, they feel like they're cutting edge, they feel like they're winning. This is where someone's going to innovate a customer experience that potentially could steal your lunch. Or that somebody could be you.
And that's what I know we are mutually hoping here. You're exactly right.
What else do people need to know about being iconic, Scott? What else do they need to add into this? And as we've made this very specific about hearing care, where are the cogs in your head going that are like, I know what I'd be focusing on if I was in your shoes right now?
Well, and Phil, I know this is something that you talk about extensively. An old story. When I was first getting started in this business many, many years ago, I was speaking at a convention in Kansas City, and I just couldn't wait to get there because the other speaker was Zig Ziglar. And just the chance to get to meet him. So I check in the hotel, my wife and I, and there was a message at the front desk. Please call Mr. Ziglar in this room. You know, I felt like a little league shortstop and Derek Jeter has left a message, you know, for me to, because I'm just getting started. So he said, I want to know if you guys would like to go to dinner tonight. So we'll go to dinner with Zig Ziglar. I'm nervous. I'm just so thrilled. And Zig said, you know, Scott, I was looking and I didn't see your book. Have you written a book? And I said, no, Zig, I've never written a book. And he said, I understand because I haven't either. Well, you know, my wife and I exchanged glances. It's we've got 8 on the shelf. You know, what do you mean you've never? And he said, but you know, I get up every morning and I write 3 pages every day. And 6 months later, somebody tells me I've got a book. And then he smiled and I instantly got it. My problem was writing a book was so overwhelming, but I could get up tomorrow and write 3 pages. And I think that's part of what, when we talk about being iconic, it seems so overwhelming that we just keep doing what we've always done. And so my primary advice is get up tomorrow morning and write the 3 pages. What's the first step that you can take? Because you don't say, I'm going to be, you know, this isn't Amazon Prime. I'm going to be iconic and it's delivered 2 days later. It is, I begin now and I'm going to write my 3 pages, or I'm going to take my first step. I'm going to reevaluate my promise. I'm going to decide the game that I'm going to play offense on. I am going to go negative and, you know, examine where the problems are in our processes that are creating dissatisfied customers. Whatever it might be, the important thing is to do your 3 pages, to start tomorrow morning at one specific point and take action on that point.
That's really quite profound. And you know, you're a Hall of Fame professional speaker. You didn't get there overnight, right? The ingredients that go into that, and at any point that you're inducting anybody into that environment, you're looking back upon a catalog of micro efforts, a catalog of micro improvements, this continued refinement of working on getting better over micro pieces of time. I know that some people are going to have some questions for you, Scott, so I want to make sure that we take some time for that. So if you do have questions, punch them in the chat. I'll field them to Scott. Scott will give his brilliance in on that. But something I'm going to invite all of you to think about for a second, just building on Scott's right 3 pages, is think about where you were 12 months ago in how you had your brand defined, what you were doing to be able to get your value proposition, how you had your marketing assets, what you're doing to be able to differentiate, the steps that you've made to become closer to iconic versus where you were 12 months ago. If you just take a snapshot at that, what you will prove to yourself is that you've got the ability to write another page, another page, another page, another page, because you're already partway in this journey. You're not starting tomorrow. You're just starting the next chapter on this tomorrow. The other thing that I wanted to ask of you, Scott, while I'm waiting for any questions from the audience, is what is the cost of not doing this work? What happens if you don't do this?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the primary question. You know, it's like, when someone asks about you or I to give a speech or to coach, consult, or attend a summit, what's the cost? No, the cost is not only financial, but it is, you know, I've got a program coming up and I'm calling it Stand Out, Earn More. And the reason is because when you stand out, you do earn more. But it's not just more profit. It's more freedom. It's more respect. It's more customers, it's more referrals, it's more repeat business. Here's another thing that's often overlooked. It's more employees of quality. One of the things I disagree with so much, and there's a lot of great ideas in the book, Good to Great, but there's one thing I really disagree with, and it says the people on the bus are more important than where the bus is going. And the reason I don't like that is because the people don't get on the bus if they don't know where the bus is going. And so when you are clear and precise about we're going to be iconic, we're going to cause the disruption in this industry, guess what? You start attracting the kind of people that you want on your team. But if they don't know where the bus is going, they're not getting on the bus in the first place.
Such good points. So we actually need to set the direction, right? And then the people will decide whether they want to come on that bus with you. And then how important they are starts to become real to life. There's a couple of big questions here, Scott, I want you to dig into. One is from Jana. Jana owns a clinic out in Houston, in Texas. And she says, for a long-standing practice, how do you look at what you have and decide what to implement or change to become iconic? That's where I struggle. Where to start and with what?
Jana, here's a question, at least to get it started. If some competitor came into your market area and disrupted everything, hurt your business because they disrupted everything, what would they do? What would they do that would make your current customers choose a different alternative? Now, if it's price, then that doesn't mean that you have to lower your price. It means that you have to strengthen the other areas that customers. Price becomes the issue when we don't see meaningful differentiation. So if price is the issue, then they don't. If a competitor comes in and disrupts with a low price, it means that your current customers haven't seen meaningful differentiation. Okay, if that's the issue, then there's the answer. But if it's not that, what would they be doing? And make a list of that. Ask your team. Make a list. If somebody came in and just blew the doors off, disrupted it, what would they do to create disruption? And you make the list. And then you're probably aware of what the second question is going to be. Why aren't we doing that? If that's what they would do to disrupt us, why don't we disrupt ourselves? Now, in some businesses, I've encouraged some businesses to even start a second company.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah, and disrupt yourself. I mean, better you disrupt yourself than somebody else does. But and just start with that. Ask yourself that question, and that will tell you for your market area. Because at the end of the day, I think you probably have a good guess, because it's one of those things that keeps you awake at night. Oh gosh, I hope nobody comes in and does this. And if it's price, then you need to reevaluate the experience. So that's where I'd begin. That's.
Can I add to that as well? Because I think that focus of that question is huge, and there's a touch more we can do with it as well. You can also ask the same question another way. That if somebody opened next door and was doing the exact same thing as you next door, what would be the first thing you'd change to differentiate?
Yep.
So there's the same thing. Then when you say, how do you prioritize this? Then just give yourself 3 things to do after you've written the list. Yep. First thing is, what am I going to do this week? So something that sits within the constraints of the fact that I can change it in 7 days. Then you're going to say, what can I do this quarter? And you're going to pick something else. And then you're going to say, what can I have done this year? And if you focus your activities through those timeframes, what you're doing is you're working a short-term, a mid-term, and a longer-term strategy that says, I'm continually differentiating myself on this stretch towards iconic. And Scott, you and I must have been doing this through this March, April, May, June, July, August period this year, right? What can I do today in order to get ready for the fact that our market's been disrupted in the way that it has been? What can we do, this quarter? What can we do this year? And you and I are in the middle of our what could we do this year pieces right now. Absolutely. That are allowing us to be able to evolve to changing market conditions, which is what every business is doing.
And I want to mention real quickly too, Phil, is the importance of the people on your team. Because again, loyalty is driven by the experience, by the emotion. And I see in many businesses, and particularly in healthcare, that hiring is based on technical proficiency, not patient experience. And I think we need to flip that around, and that you can teach the technical aspect of what you do, and you can help them learn and you can help them grow. But it's finding people that care about creating a patient experience. That ought to be the priority. And if people aren't doing that, then they need to be presented with the opportunity to share their technical expertise elsewhere.
And that's great. And then the ever struggle of finding licensed practitioner comes to light as well, where sometimes you have to put somebody in a hole. But yeah, this passion towards caring about the experience is key.
Well, Jim Rohn said many years ago, success is something you attract, not something you pursue. By the person you become. And I've done a variation of that on business, and I think it's true with employees. The employees that you attract become the employees that your customers pursue. And by that, I mean, when you are, again, the right people don't get on the bus if they don't know where the bus is going. So it begins with your clarity that you are going to be the disruptive factor, and you are going to be unique and distinctive and become iconic in your business. And guess what? That attracts a higher level of technician. Because now you are the place that they want to be a part of. I mentioned St. Elmo's restaurant earlier. St. Elmo's came up with the idea,
podcast.
Most restaurants hire servers that are between jobs or are students, and they look at it as a part-time fill-in type of position. St. Elmo's said, what if we looked at being a server at our restaurant as a career that you would aspire to?
Guides and trainings
so they pay them a little, but every waiter has a business card. Every waiter has a 401k plan. Every waiter is presented with a bottle of wine on their anniversary of the vintage of the year that they started with the restaurant. And now they confess to me that one of their major expenses is coming up with vintage wines from the 70s because these folks have been here so long. But on the other hand, what a great problem to have, because they know their customers by name. The customers come in and ask for. The Rolling Stones played 2 consecutive nights in Indianapolis. Nobody could figure that out. 2 nights in New York, 2 nights in LA, 2 nights in Chicago, 2 nights in why? And in Keith Richards' autobiography, it came out that it's because they wanted to eat 2 nights at St. Elmo's.
That's iconic.
Isn't that that's being iconic.
And, there you go.
And so if a steakhouse in Indianapolis could do that, don't tell me that someone with listening devices in Des Moines can't do it.
And a $6,000-7,000 transaction, right?
Yeah, yeah.
With $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of margin in it sometimes too. Like
that has lasting benefit, not just a immediate benefit.
Final question here comes from Ollie, and we're going to expand on this a little, and I'm going to give you a hypothetical set of circumstances. Is Scott, you are now the owner of a hearing care clinic.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. And you got so excited about this, you've zoomed in for the experience.
I did. I got out of focus there because somehow the autofocus came on that I didn't want. So
Scott comes in for the close-up because he wants to run a hearing care clinic. Julie's like, I'll sell you one. But yeah, Scott is saying the examples you shared about how Taxi Terry focused on the small touches. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about little touches that hearing clinics can make to wow patients and become distinctive. Let me reframe that a touch and say, Scott, you're the owner. What are the things that you would be looking at, experimenting with, playing with, considering as items that you could make a distinctive moment for patients?
Phil, you're the master of language and of questions, so I will offer my meager attempt at this. But we own the federally registered trademark on the term "the ultimate customer experience," and I think I know that's where I'd begin. I would say, what is the ultimate experience that a patient, prospect, customer could have with us? And it begins with this important question: and then what? Somebody walks in, and then what? Somebody calls to make an appointment, and then what? It's getting very granular, and most businesses don't do that. Let me give you a quick example. The onboarding process at most businesses is you watch Mary and you do what Mary does, as opposed to really saying, this is what we're about, and this is what we say, and this is what we do. And, I go through in our small business. Okay, somebody calls. How do we answer the phone? And what do we say? And then what? When they respond this way, how do we respond? And it is getting so precise, and we've expanded that and learned so much from you, Phil, is that being precise with the language creates greater results. And I would focus on, and Ollie's exactly right, it is the little touches. There's an old-time speaker, Joel Weldon, and Joel's in his 80s and is a friend of mine. And in his heyday, Joel would stand in front of the audience and he'd say, by show of hands, how many of you here have ever been bitten by an elephant? Well, nobody raised their hand. And then Joel would say, how many of you have ever been bitten by a mosquito? Well, everybody would raise their hand. And he said, see, it's the little things that get you. I've always loved that because, my family had a grocery store when I was growing up, little small town. I'm from a rural community in Indiana. And we had, and that was what I noticed. It wasn't that, you had milk on sale for this price. It was like the store was always clean, and we made an effort to know every customer's name. And it was the little things that caused the big box retailer down the road to close after a few years, because people sampled the low price, but what they really wanted was to have the ultimate customer experience. And it is the small touches will vary. And by the way, you don't want your small touches to be identical to anybody else's small touches. But it is constantly asking, and then what, and drilling down. It's being clear about who you are. And it's being creative in what you do. It's communicating through the power of narrative that we talked about earlier. And it's delivering that ultimate customer experience.
So the game becomes, and I choose my words wisely on this, calling it a game because you have permission to be playful on this.
Yes.
Is take every route that a patient finds themselves interacting with your business, say what happened, and then keep asking the and then what question. And you're probably going to create like a catalog of tiny micro steps that you can improve that are going to result in you not doing one thing that is called the ultimate customer experience, but doing hundreds of things that compound to create the ultimate customer experience. And if I think about those brands that get close to that, it's like the Ritz, right? Is the Ritz-Carlton hotel experience. They don't have one thing that makes it the ultimate customer experience. They have dozens compounded that add up to the fact that it is consistently one of the best hotels in the world. And Scott, I know that you're responsible for part of that in some ways with the work that you've done in hospitality. So thank you for that. I appreciate it when I get to stay and experience it for myself.
Scott, and by the way, one of the things that makes Ritz so great is it's not and sometimes I've used that example of Ritz as well. And then somebody's come up back to me after a program and said, but you don't understand. I don't have the money to invest in that Ritz has. And I said, but then you missed the point. It's not about the marble. It's not about that. And what they do, for example, no matter what the customer asks, to say, it's my pleasure. No problem, right? I mean, that doesn't cost them a cent to educate their people in how to respond to customer needs and desires. See, one of the challenges with the ultimate customer experience is customers don't all want the same experience. It's not a cookie cutter. So, and that's why it's so important to get the best people that you can get in your organization, because they are better able to create the different experience that different customers desire and require.
So you've got to create this yourself. We can't say, here's the blueprint. We can't say, just follow these 17 steps, or here is the 21-page report that will give you the understanding to create the ultimate customer experience. You got to do the work, right? And that what question, if you just took that from this discussion today, and then what, and do that work with your teams, get granular about what the journey looks like. And the hearing care journey is almost the ultimate customer experience to deliver the ultimate customer experience.
Exactly.
Like, you think about that patient journey, and my challenge to all of you at this point in time is your patient experience has changed. With curbside coming in, with remote support coming in, with the availability that you have towards time with them in a face-to-face environment changing, etc., you have the chance to throw out the old playbook and write a new one by saying, okay, the phone rings and Mrs. Smith is coming in at 9:15 on Thursday. So we've confirmed the appointment, and then what? Well, currently we just wait for her to show up, but what could you put in? Instead of putting in the phone call that says, I'm checking you're not canceling, what do you do to put a communication in that adds to the patient experience before they come in? What do you do to grow their education before they come in? What do you do that means that when she arrives, she knows where to park? What do you do to then be able to say, well, when she gets to the front door, she knows she's at the right place? What do you do that when she comes through the front door, that she receives a greeting that isn't in response to her saying, hi, my name's Mrs. Smith, I'm here for my appointment? That the greeting comes in a Taxi Terry-esque style that says, welcome for the ride of your life, or whatever it's going to be, right? Is we get the chance to be able to direct the show that the customer is going to be a part of. And a great friend of mine called Scott McKain says that all business is show business, right?
Yeah.
All business is show business. So take the fun in it, build your show, and do the work to be able to keep asking, and then what? Knowing that you're the chef in the kitchen, crafting your own patient experience. And hopefully that somebody one day might describe it as iconic. Scott McKain, how do people find out more about you? I know you got some cool stuff going on right now. Your books are wonderful. You're doing great work with your daily distinction. There's so much stuff, I don't know where to point people. I
appreciate it. There are free resources available for you at distinctionnation.com. distinctionnation.com. I'm hosting a summit where we're going to really drill deeply into what does it take to separate yourself from the competition. And if they just go to distinctionsummit.com, They can learn all about the summit. And by the way, I'll do something. If they'll enter the code, if they'd like to attend, it's October 16th to 18th. It's a virtual event. If you'd like to attend, just enter the code DISTINCT 2020. And because you're a friend of Phil's, you're a friend of mine, and it can get you $100 off the registration. So just enter the code DISTINCT 2020, get you $100 off, and we'd love to have you be a part of that. And all the information about contact. By the way, I do a free live stream every day on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and that's what he's talking about daily distinction. It's 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific every day. So join me there. Love to see you there as well.
Sometimes I just tune in to listen to Scott's voice.
You're so nice.
I find it soothing. Scott McKain, thank you for your attendance, for your contribution, for everything you bring to the business community during this period of time. We are grateful for you sharing your insights live with the Inner Circle. I know that the industry as a whole are going to experience more from learning from the great work that you do. Let's see if what we can do is together raise the game so that more patients are aware of the great work that you do. Stop keeping it a secret.
Thank you.
The big takeaways, any thank yous you have for Scott, put them in the chat. But until next time, this has been your Inner Circle Meet the Expert session. Today we've had Scott McKain, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
And there we have it. That is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Hearing podcast. Make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when a new episode goes live. If you're feeling kind enough to share your experience and leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. And if you want to learn more, then go to www.orange-grey.com for article, guides and trainings specifically written for high-performing hearing care businesses. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.